ค่ะท่านอาจารย์คะวันนี้สวัสดีค่ะวันนี้ก็เป็นรายการที่3นะคะในการอบรมครูนะคะผ่านทางไกลนะคะโดยมูลนิธิการศึกษาทางไกลผ่านดาวเทียมวังไกลกังวลมหาลัยโอเรกอนสถานทูตสหรัฐสมาคมชายทีโซแล้วก็สถาบันภาษาจุฬาลงกรณ์มหาวิทยาลัยนะคะสำหรับวันนี้เป็นเซสชันที่3ในหัวข้อ Project Based Learning เหมือนเดิมแต่ว่าเป็นเรื่องเกี่ยวกับ Assessment นะคะการประเมินผลสำหรับวันนี้ท่านขวัญแก้ววัชโรไทยท่านประธานมูลนิธิได้กำลังเดินทางอยู่เพื่อเยี่ยมเยียนมอบของให้กับโรงเรียนต่างๆทางภาคอีสานแล้ววันนี้ท่านอยู่ที่ประเทศลาวค่ะอยู่ที่โรงเรียนวัฒนธรรมเด็กกำพร้าหลัก67ท่านกำลังดูรายการนี้อยู่ด้วยค่ะOver to you Leslie could you please start the program by greetings คุณขวัญแก้ว thank you
Absolutely, it would be our honor. Yes, this is University of Oregon, and we welcome you back to Session 3 on Project-Based Learning. We'd like to extend a hearty welcome to Tan Quan Cao and his associates out in the remote locations. We understand they're following along with us here tonight. I'm Leslie Ott-Beckman. This is Cindy Kiefer. We'd like to also thank our associates at the U.S. Embassy in Thai TESOL, in Chula Longhorn University, to all of the Royal Thai Distance Learning Foundation and TOT Communications. It takes a great team to make these sessions work, and this is a very new technology. As we saw tonight, sometimes we have small technical issues that we overcome, but we do overcome them, and we're very happy to be here tonight with you. This is a 5-part series on project-based learning. In the first part, we talked about project-based learning as a concept, as a pedagogical framework. We're doing something a little different this year. It's a kind of follow-along series. And so the teachers who are with us in Hua Hin and in Bangkok, and those of you out at the ERIC centers and in remote locations around the Mekong Peninsula are following along. And you've had homework each time. And with each session, we build on the work that you've done. In the first session, we asked you to choose some topics and themes and a type of project. When we met just last week for session number 2, we talked at length about goals and checklists. And what we especially emphasized is the fact that these goals and checklists are going to be instrumental for tonight's session in setting assessments. So our big focus tonight will be on taking those goals and those checklists that you put together and coming up with assessments. And we're going to do some talk about definitions of assessment, types of assessment, and then we're going to steer you, especially those of you who are new to project-based learning, toward 1 or 2 examples of assessments. And again, as with last week, these will be examples, and you are free to adapt those as you see fit for your particular students and your project and your school situation. All right, so the key word tonight is A for assessment. All right. And if we can look at our slide for just a moment, we'd like to point out to you that, as usual, all of the handouts for this session and for previous sessions are available through the web. So the website thaiuo.uoregon.edu has copies of all the handouts, all the recommended readings, a copy of the video from the sessions, and a copy of the PowerPoint slides that you're looking at right now. So again, that's thaiuo.uoregon.edu. Ajahn Suchada and Ajahn Narapurn, have the teachers tonight had a chance to get copies of the handouts for this session?
Yes, they've got everything.
How about in Bangkok? Okay, Bangkok has copies. How about Hua Hin?
Yes, they have copies. And
okay, excellent. Okay, good. We'll be referring to those handouts tonight, and you can follow along on them and use the contents of them. If you don't have the handouts yet, if you're with us from the ERIC Center or another location, you can get those handouts later. You can go back and do this in groups or individually on your own later as well. All right. Here's our plan for tonight. We're doing opening remarks, which we just finished. we're going to have you work a little bit more on activity number 1, which is going to be essentially a review kind of activity. Cindy and I are going to talk to you about some different definitions and types of assessment. We've got 2 activities tonight. We're going to give you a fairly large chunk of time to work on activity 2, which will be matching the goals from last session with tonight's assessment examples. And then we'll leave time for some wrap-up and questions at the end. Last week we had some really great questions at the end of the session.
Yes.
So Cindy and I are both hoping that you'll continue in that vein. If you have questions from previous sessions or from tonight, let's try to save a little bit of time at the end, and please be brave and come up to the microphone and ask those, because they're of benefit to everybody. Review. What we'd like you to do, and I think you started this a little bit already, is to talk to a new person. What we tend to do when we attend sessions like this is we tend to sit by the same people. We get a favorite chair or a favorite desk, and we sit by our friends, and we sit by the same people every time, and that's fine, but we'd like to also encourage you to do some cross-dialoguing around the room. And so we'd like to encourage you to talk to some new people tonight that you haven't talked to yet. And one reason for doing this is it's a kind of mini teaching exercise. If you can clearly explain to someone what it is that you're doing and trying to accomplish, it helps you internalize it, it helps the other person understand, and you can also get new ideas from the people that you're talking with.
Or you may even come up with more new ideas for yourself because you see small gaps in your instructional plan.
Right. This is a good clarification process. We encourage you to ask each other questions when you're engaged in this kind of a dialogue and to offer constructive feedback. This in itself is a really good example of one kind of assessment in the process we're going to talk about tonight, which is formative assessment. So forming your project as you go along, getting information about it is part of the activity. By now, you have decided if your students are going to put together a report style of project, a display style of project, or a dramatization. And once again, these are not necessarily mutually exclusive. It may be that your report involves some oral component. Very likely your display will involve reading and writing, likewise for the dramatization. So what we're assuming in all of these is what we talked about at the first session, is that they involve integrated skills and that they're authentic kinds of communication. Probably your students will be engaged in lots of different language skills, but the end product will vary depending on if it's a report, a display, or a dramatization. So please get into partners or groups. Try to talk to somebody new that you haven't talked to yet in your group or in your room. Give that person or those people an overview of your project, an explanation of the goals that you've chosen. Did you choose language goals? Did you choose content goals? Did you choose procedural or mechanic or behavioral kinds of goals? And then show that person in your group or those people what your current goals and your checklist looks like. And remember, these are all items that you're going to be giving to your students at the start of their project as well. Okay. Questions? Naraporn or Ajahn Suchada, do you have questions before we go into activity 1?
No, I think that's clear. Thank you.
Okay. Would you like to do a quick translation for us on these points? Do you think that's necessary?
อาจารย์คะ
Okay.
อาจารย์เลสลี่ให้เราเข้ากลุ่ม discussion นะคะอาจารย์แต่อาจารย์แนะนำว่าลองคุยเข้ากลุ่มกับกลุ่มคนละกลุ่มกับเมื่อคราวที่แล้วนะคะเพื่อที่จะได้แลกเปลี่ยนได้ความคิดเห็นที่ต่างๆกันโดยที่ลองเช็คdouble check เรื่อง goals นะคะกับเรื่อง checklist ของอาจารย์นะคะอีกทีหนึ่ง goal ที่อาจารย์เลือกมานะคะที่ทำเป็นกันบ้านแล้วก็ checklist ค่ะเพื่อที่ได้ทำขั้นต่อไปขอสัก2 นาทีได้ไหมคะตรงนี้ค่ะ I give them 2 minutes.
Okay, Cindy's coming. We're just full of creative solutions here tonight on both sides. This is good. What would be really helpful to Cindy and I is if we could see one or two examples of the students or the teacher's goals. It'll help us direct our comments tonight on assessment. Is there one group in Bangkok or maybe one group in Hua Hin who can give us an example of the types of goals that they've set?
Yeah, there's one group in Bangkok, and the presenter is Ajahn Busaba. Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. That would be very helpful, please.
Yeah, thank you.
And one group in Hua Hin as well.
I have no microphone control. We're just going to be on.
Want me to take notes?
Yeah, she's talking.
Good morning, everybody, and good evening for Oregon State University. Today I would like to tell about last homework about checklist, right? Topic of our group is interesting people in your opinion. Goal is about language skill, writing characteristic of interesting people in your opinion, and speaking, and a little bit of creative learning of the student idea, right? We have the checklist about vocabulary, about adjective, about characteristic of interesting people of the student opinion, and grammar use, easy grammar use for Thai students. The result of data or research from internet, magazine or newspaper or anywhere else that the student can learn or can find their interesting data, right? May I stop here and would like to give more information about your opinion and our other teachers' opinion. Thank you. ค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ Thank you อาจารย์บุษบา and over to หัวหิน Would that be alright?
Ajahn Rujara is talking about her project, and she has her students as well.
Good evening, Leslie.
Good evening.
Okay. According to the topic project-based learning, there are many kinds of goals to use, but the one we choose is display, that is the bulletin board. Now we have one group of students from Wangkai School would like to show you how to do this project, how to choose the goal, and how to choose the project and checklist. What inspired them to do this project? Okay, let's meet him now.
Hello, you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, may I introduce myself? My name is Suphat Sawat Sintong. I'm studying in Mathayom 6/1 about science and mathematics program. I have to show you a report about my topics. My topic is campaign. This is about love. So, my group have member is 6 persons, about 17 or to 19 years old. This is my friends in my class. And times for 1 week. So the first we have brainstorming, and then we have to vote at opinions. Yes. And then my friends say, I think now educations in Thailand or and other country have problems about conflicts and other problems. But I think this gets idea for me because I want to make a friendship and develop about love in the world. So, especially in the deep of south of Thailand have problems, I want to make a friendship between profiles in my countries, Thailand. And then other countries, you see a news or newspaper and internet and others have a situations and other problems about between a country. I think it's not too good for me. Yes, and then so I have to say you go. What's goal is I have to do this project because to the process people in the world, and then say to love is other, not just only your friend. You can say to everyone in the world, because everyone in the world is the human. You're human, I'm human, and everybody is human. You can give a love, and then you can make a friendship between a country, and then I think this is a best project for me. And then the last one, I have any question, you can comment me and your opinion, because I want to develop the next project for me and other. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello.
Okay.
Yeah, over to you, Leslie.
All right, thank you both, Bangkok and Joaquin, for sharing those project ideas with us. I think the strength in what we've just seen is that they involve authentic, real communication and a broad base of skills that students are drawing on.
And they were able to identify if they were focusing on language-based goals and effective goals. So that's clear what your goals are.
Yes.
Okay, what we'd like to encourage you to do by teachers, by way of further clarification on these goals, is you really need to write them down in a list. And we haven't seen that yet tonight. I'm sure that you're doing that, but they need to be a really clear list, and a short. And again, we talked about last week, a short list is going to be better than a long list with lots of things on it that people may or may not be able to get to. So depending on the length of the project and the structure of it, those goals will vary. So we heard examples of language goals, we heard research goals, we heard content goals, and we heard affective goals in terms of making friendships and changing attitudes. So those were some very nice examples. And we wish you much luck with your friendship project. I'm sure it's going to be very successful.
I want to say you Merry Christmas.
Now that you have identified your goals, you also need to be able to make sure that you can measure if the students have attained those goals.
Right, and that's what we're talking about tonight, is the assessment or the measurement piece. Okay, let's move on. We're going to talk about different forms of assessment here tonight. When we're talking about assessment, it often falls into two categories, summative versus formative assessment. Cindy, you want to talk a little bit about summative?
Well, summative tests are probably those that most of us have most familiarity with. Those are the traditional type tests where there is a right or a wrong answer. Usually there are multiple choice, true or false, short answer, or fill in the blank. There's a right answer and there's a wrong answer, and doesn't give much freedom for the student to be creative, and it's usually at the lower level of knowledge or comprehension skills.
Right, and so what we traditionally see with summative kinds of assessment is we'll see things like tests at the end of the term, or tests that decide whether or not you get into a university or perhaps pass to another class. And they're often associated with some kind of a score or a grade. And we are not saying here tonight, don't do summative. We're saying there's a place for summative assessment, and then there's a place for what we're calling formative assessment. Formative assessment is feedback along the way that helps to form or inform the process of the project as you go along. So, for example, tonight we saw a nice description from the students of what they'd like to do, what they're planning to do with their project, and this would be a very good time in the process of that project to give formative assessment. So what seems to be a good direction, what seems to be strengths in terms of the goals. Perhaps asking some questions or making some suggestions about different directions or ways to get there. So our focus tonight will be primarily on formative assessment, what that looks like, who does it, how often it can be done, and some models, some examples to consider.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who does the assessment? Who can do formative assessment?
Well, it can be yourself,
Right? And by self, we mean the students.
the students, or even the teacher. Oh, we have teacher at the bottom there, but yes, the students can assess how they are doing, where their areas of difficulty are, what they can do differently or better the next time.
I think students, if you ask them to, often have a really clear sense of where they're experiencing success and where they're experiencing difficulties. And so if you have some kind of questionnaire, you have some kind of means of having students reflect and think for themselves, these were my initial goals. Here I am about halfway through the project. Which of those goals have I met? Which of them am I still working on? Are there areas I didn't anticipate? Are there things I need help with that I didn't know I would need help with? What kinds of resources am I looking for?
In the self-assessment, the checklist is very helpful or a good starting point for the student to work from.
Between now and next January, and this remark or invitation I'm addressing to our facilitators, so Ajaran Suchada, Ajaran Naraporn, if you can get some concrete examples from teachers of their goals and their checklists and email those to us, that would be really helpful for us to see. So we saw a couple of nice oral descriptions tonight, one from a teacher, one from a representative student. But if we could see some concrete examples of what are people's goals and checklists look like on paper or in writing, I think that would be really helpful. For us, it would be a nice formative feedback so that it can help steer our remarks from here for sessions 4 and 5 as well. Okay, so students can reflect, they can give feedback to themselves. They can also get feedback from their peers, from each other. So it can be within a group. The young man who talked to us said that he was working in a group of 6 students. They can reflect among themselves. They can look at their checklists, at their goals, and decide, sort of step back and think about where they are. You can also have groups of peers give feedback to each other among groups.
Peer feedback is something that sometimes has to be managed by the teacher carefully in the beginning. And once students feel comfortable giving constructive criticism or support to other students or suggestions or ideas, then peer feedback or peer assessment becomes much easier for them.
I think you're right. I think students need some role modeling here. And so oftentimes what we find with our students is, as the teacher, I might even bring Cindy in with 2 teachers, and we might do an example in front of the students. Here's what positive suggestions sound like. Here are the grammatical constructions or the polite terms that you use to formulate these. Here are what constructive suggestions for improvement sound like. Here are ways that you do this. And I think what students need to understand is it's important to have balance. You have to do both. It's nice to hear compliments, but you need the other side of it as well. Along with the compliments, there's always room for improvement. And so we need to hear that we're doing what we're doing a good job with. I think it's also really useful to hear from our peers areas that could be improved, and sometimes that's in the form of a simple question for clarification. I understand what you talked about here. I don't really understand this part over here, or something seems to be missing.
Well, actually, there's a traditional type formula where you say 2 really good things, and things are doing well, and then make a recommendation for a change or a revision or a modification, and then finish with another good compliment to the people in the group. So that kind of formula works well with young learners. Say 2 good things and then 1 constructive criticism.
And even with older learners, and this is something you might practice among yourselves, out in the ERIC centers, in the groups in Hua Hin and in Bangkok. Teachers yourselves are working in groups with this set of 5 sessions, and so you might practice it in advance with each other, and maybe even share some ideas.
And saying things in a positive way is a good skill for everybody to learn, students and teachers. Yeah.
Right. So assessment can occur. I can assess myself. My peers can assess me. Other people can offer assessment as well. If you're doing reports, whether it's reports or displays or dramatizations, maybe the parents will come in to the school. Maybe there will be opportunities for community members, for other classes within the school, for visitors, for administrators.
Or two classes at the same level can visit each other's classroom and view each other's projects and give feedback to the other class.
Or even different levels.
Right.
So older students or more advanced students can give feedback to youngers in a kind of mentoring.
Right, that would be great, yeah.
And we put teachers at the bottom of our list, not because they're the least important, but just because what we find with our own projects is the more we can hold back from our comments and let the students comment for themselves and for each other, they're really able to do a lot of that. Sometimes if we jump right in and give our feedback first, then it acts as an inhibitor, and students may be less likely to give feedback to each other.
And of course, teachers do self-assessment too.
Sure.
Are their instructional strategies working? What can they do better? What should they do differently? How are the students moving, and what can they do to facilitate the learning?
Teachers can also ask for feedback from their students. This works well, especially if it's done anonymously. We're going to talk tonight about anonymous and non-anonymous kinds of feedback. But if you're wondering how your students are doing with their project and you feel like they're too shy to tell you because you're the teacher, you can put a simple question or two on the board and ask them to write their responses and not sign their names. And you can often get very honest and helpful feedback this way from the students as well.
Because, yeah, many times the students appear to understand or appear to know what they're doing, but actually you may have some people who are kind of lost in the lesson.
And especially if it's their first time with a project, it may take a while to build up these trust relationships and to get these different kinds of assessment flowing in a lot of different directions. I'm wondering if we need to pause here for a moment and allow Ajar Naraporn to do a quick summing up or translation. Is this a good point for that, or would you like us to continue to move on?
Yeah, may I take a few minutes here? Thank you.
Yes, please.
ค่ะอาจารย์ครับ อาจารย์เลสลี่กับอาจารย์ซินนี่นะคะก็พูดถึง assessment การประเมินผลนะคะโดยก็พูดถึงว่าจริงเราก็คงทราบกันแล้วว่ามี2ชนิดใช่ไหมคะ summative ก็เป็นประเภทที่เราใช้กันอยู่บ่อยๆมีตัวเลือกเป็น multiple choice นะคะก็มีคำตอบถูกและผิดแล้วก็อีกประเภทนึงคือ formative นะคะซึ่งอันนี้เนี่ยทางอาจารย์จะเน้นมากเลย formative นี่สำหรับ project based learning เลยนะคะเพราะว่า formative assessment เนี่ยก็คือการให้ feedback ตลอดทางนะตั้งแต่ต้นนะที่นักเรียนเริ่มทำโปรเจกต์ไปจนถึงตอนจบเพื่อที่นักเรียนจะได้ปรับปรุงแก้ไขไปได้ตลอดนะแล้วก็ใครเป็นผู้ที่จะประเมินผลอาจารย์ก็พูดถึงตัวนักเรียนเองนะคะที่จะเป็นผู้ประเมินเองอย่างเช่นเราอาจจะทำฟีดแบ็กให้นักเรียนประเมินตนเองนะคะแล้วก็เพื่อนๆนะคะ peer feedback ก็อาจจะประเมินลักษณะเป็นกลุ่มนะแล้วก็แต่ครูก็คงจะต้องช่วยที่จะให้ตัวอย่าง ว่า peer feedback จะประเมินยังไงนะคะคือต้องเน้นว่าจะต้อง constructive สร้างสรรค์การวิจารณ์นะการคอมเมนต์งานของเพื่อนจะต้องสร้างสรรค์แล้วก็ positive นะแล้วก็เป็นการเสนอแนะนะให้ข้อมูลเสนอแนะเพื่อที่จะให้เพื่อนเนี่ยปรับปรุงโปรเจกต์ให้ดีขึ้นเป็นต้นนะคะอันนี้อาจารย์เลสลี่ก็บอกว่าครูคงจะต้องทำให้ดูเป็นตัวอย่างนะฮะแล้วก็ others นะคนอื่นที่จะประเมินก็อย่างเช่นอาจจะถ้าเผื่อเป็นงานที่มีนิทรรศการมีบอร์ดมีละครเชิญผู้ปกครองมาดูนะคะหรือว่ามีนักเรียนในคลาสอื่นๆนะในชั้นเรียนอื่นเนี่ยก็มาดูแล้วก็อาจจะมาช่วยให้คอมเมนต์ในส่วนของครูเองอาจารย์เลสลี่บอกว่าครูเป็นผู้ประเมินเนี่ยอาจารย์เลสลี่พูดเป็นรายการสุดท้ายเพราะว่าอาจารย์บอกว่าครูเนี่ยควรจะยับยั้งชั่งใจตัวเองอย่าเพิ่งนะ อาจารย์ใช้คำว่าจำไรจินนะคือไม่อย่าเพิ่งเข้าไปรีบประเมินเด็กแล้วรีบบอกว่าอันนู้นไม่ดีอันนี้ควรเปลี่ยนควรจะเป็นแบบนั้นแบบนี้นะคะอาจารย์บอกว่าครูนี่ควรจะเป็นคนสุดท้ายที่จะประเมินให้นักเรียนได้ reflect ได้ดูประเมินตนเองก่อนเพื่อนช่วยประเมินก่อนนะคะคนอื่นๆก่อนแล้วสุดท้ายมาถึงครูก็เป็นคนที่จะตะล่อมแล้วก็เก็บทุกอย่างนะคะแล้วก็ช่วยให้คำแนะนำสุดท้ายค่ะ Over to you Leslie thank you
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to those of you both in Hua Hin and Bangkok tonight and out in our outlying centers who are bearing with us through our technical difficulties here this evening. Thank you for your patience. What does a formative assessment look like on these projects? That's what we're going to talk about next. What can it look like? It can take a number of forms. There are courses taught over entire semesters and years on this kind of topic. What we've tried to do for you tonight, both with the readings on the website and in our examples in your handout, is to offer you one really concrete type of example that you can begin to work with right away. And this form of assessment is called rubrics. Rubrics are typically in a table kind of format. And the two important pieces, the two things that a rubric contains are the criteria, what is being assessed, and then the levels of performance that tell a student they're doing it well, they're doing it really well with excellence, or there's a lot of need for improvement still. So we're going to talk about two different kinds of rubrics tonight. One is a holistic rubric, which is a very global, very general kind of rubric, and we'll talk about where and when that might be used. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about analytic rubrics, which I think are the ones that are going to be of most use to you with your student, your projects. These rubrics are built directly on your list of goals. That's why the list of goals is really important. You need to be able to talk about the goals. What are the language goals? What are the content goals? But you need to have a list of those goals. So last week we talked about creating a list, making it a real clear list, having one item one thing per item, because that goal, those goals we're going to turn around tonight and directly transform those into your assessment rubric. So again, if we could ask for some examples of those sometime before January, that'll give us an idea if this is what's actually happening or if we need to redirect slightly for sessions 4 and 5. On your handout, you'll see some definitions of holistic versus analytic rubrics. Cindy, you want to talk a little bit about holistic rubrics?
Well, holistic is kind of the way it sounds, whole, very general feedback on a project how the group is doing as a whole in reaching the goals. Most of the time this is kind of in narrative form more than numerical or a grade A, B, C, although you may give a grade, a holistic grade to the group.
Summatively at the end.
At the end, yes.
Yeah, in terms of a formative assessment tool, holistic feedbacks, as Cindy said, tend to be on the project as a whole. And these work very well with learners of all ages. I've been in very young learner classrooms where the teacher had a very simple comment form next to the projects, and the students would come in and write 2 nice things and 1 area for improvement, just on the project as a whole. So you may be in your goals looking at language skills and content areas and performance and behavioral kinds of things, but in a holistic kind of assessment, you look at the project as a whole and you give very general kinds of comments about it, typically in a narrative kind of format.
Right. So, for example, if the students had a writing, you wouldn't, in a holistic sense, you wouldn't correct all the grammar points.
No, or the spelling. You
No.
wouldn't nitpick over those kinds of details.
No. You would go more on a global level for comprehensibility or style or
clarity
and organization, but not on the very discrete level of sentence structure or grammatical correctness.
And we'll look at a couple examples of that. This is something that, let's say, for example, you have one class that visits another class, and you have to get through the formative assessment in a fairly quick manner, but you want to have some good feedback for students to work with. You might have Class A, Class B comes in, the projects are set up, Class B circulates around the room, and the job of each student is to comment on at least 2 projects. And you've got some kind of holistic comment form, and the students write their comments on a couple of the projects, and then at the end of that 10 or 15 minutes, then they leave. Then the next day, Class A goes and visits Class B, does a very simple, quick, kind of around the room, kind of holistic assessment, offering both positive and I don't want to say negative, but
or
areas
maybe
for
constructive
criticism or suggestions.
Yes.
Yeah. The other kind of assessment is called analytic, and it's a lot like what it sounds too. It's more of an analysis, and it's giving a more detailed feedback. And this is where you would look in detail at the projects, and you would say how many research resources did the students use? Did they summarize them clearly? Did they build them into the final project?
Did they follow the directions?
Did they follow the directions?
Is it organized correctly? And in this kind, you can also get more discrete analysis.
Right. Did they correct their spelling?
Right.
Right.
Did they put periods at the ends of their sentences?
Right. And it's even though it's analytic and it's looking at the details, it's something you can do formatively in the middle of a project, because this gives the students feedback at a time in the process when they have an opportunity still to make improvements, to make changes. And everybody likes to have that kind of a chance. This brings us to our second activity for tonight, which is to ask you to get together with a partner or a small group, not a big group. If you're going to do a group, keep it to 3 or 4. Get out those goals. Look at the holistic and the analytic examples in your handout. So if you look at pages 3 and 4 in your handout, you'll see an example of a holistic kind of assessment, and you'll see one for an analytic. And these are based on the examples we gave you last week.
Right.
So last week we gave you examples of goals. We took those goals for this week and we turned them into examples of holistic and analytic assessments. So this is what we're looking for from you. We're looking for a list of your goals. We're looking for your checklist. We're looking for holistic and or analytic assessments that you will be using as part of your project. So Ajarn Narapur and Ajarn Suchata, what we'd like to ask you to do as facilitators is get people talking, get out their goals, get out the examples of the assessments, and have them start deciding, who's going to assess the projects? Will it be a holistic or an analytic assessment, and what will appear on them? Is that clear? Do you have questions?
Yes, thank you. May I give a brief, notes on the 2 kinds of assessment first? Yeah. อาจารย์คะ
Sure. And we'll give you 5 or 10 minutes to work on this tonight. People are obviously not going to get finished with it. So if they can just get started tonight, then we'll see what kind of questions they have and give them time to work on it before we see you again in January.
Right. Sure. Thank you. อาจารย์คะอาจารย์เลสลี่กับอาจารย์ซินดี้ก็พูดถึง assessment ซึ่งมี 2 ประเภทนะคะ อย่างแรกก็เรียกว่า holistic assessment นะคะคือการให้ฟีดแบ็กโดยรวมนะคะของโปรเจกต์ซึ่งอาจจะเป็นลักษณะเป็นการเขียนบรรยายเป็น narrative form นะคะหรือว่าอาจจะให้เป็นเกรดก็ได้นะอาจารย์ซินดี้บอกแต่ว่าก็เป็นเกรดซึ่งคือดูภาพรวมของทั้งโปรเจกต์นะคะแล้วก็ไม่ลงดีเทลไปแก้กราฟมาไวยากรณ์ที่ตัวสะกดอะไรที่ผิดนะคะคือดูในภาพกว้างอย่างเช่นดูสไตล์ดูว่ามีความชัดเจนไหมนะคะ organization เป็นยังไงนะคะอันนี้อีกประเภทหนึ่งคือ analytic assessment นะคะอันนั้นคือการลงลึกนะคะวิเคราะห์ดูรายละเอียดให้ฟีดแบ็กอย่างละเอียดอย่างเช่นว่านักเรียนเนี่ยตอนนี้เนี่ยทำตาม directions ไหมทำตามขั้นตอนไหมนะคะแล้วก็ควรจะแก้ไขอะไรตรงไหนนะคะซึ่งอันนี้ก็เป็นลักษณะเป็นดูรายละเอียดนะคะส่วนกิจกรรมที่ 2อาจารย์เลสลี่ก็บอกว่าอยากจะให้อาจารย์ ทำงานเป็นคู่หรือเป็นกลุ่มนะคะแต่กลุ่มไม่ใหญ่นักสัก3 คน 4 คนนะคะโดยอาจารย์เอาโกของอาจารย์ที่นำมาวันนี้นะคะมาเป็นตัวตั้งแล้วก็ดูตัวอย่างค่ะในชีตนะคะที่อาจารย์เลสลี่แจกหน้า3กับหน้า4นะคะซึ่งเป็นตัวอย่างของ holistic rubric นะคะในหน้า3แล้วก็ส่วนหน้า4ก็จะเป็นตัวอย่างของAnalytic Assessment นะคะอาจารย์ดูตัวอย่างตรงนี้แล้วอาจารย์มาเทียบกับโกของอาจารย์นะคะและอาจารย์ลองดูซิว่าจะประเมินตรงไหนอย่างไรและใครเป็นผู้ประเมินค่ะให้เวลาสัก5 นาทีนะคะอาจารย์เลสลี่บอกว่าคงไม่เสร็จในคราวนี้แต่ว่าให้พอเป็นไอเดียว่าอาจารย์ดูตัวอย่างของ Holistic กับ Analytic Rubrics นะคะแล้วก็มาประยุกต์กับ Goals ของอาจารย์ที่อาจารย์ตั้งไว้ค่ะ
Hello, Leslie. Ho Hin
Yes.
is ready. Ho Hin is ready.
Question is ready. Okay.
Yeah.
Ready for
we
what?
have one teacher. We have one
Ready for
teacher who
anything,
has
huh?
goals
How about,
and
okay, how about Bangkok?
checklists and everything.
Okay, good. Bangkok, let's ask you to come back together. Also, we're close to the end of our time. What Cindy and I would like to invite you to do for January is to go back to the handouts from last week and this week. And if you look on page 4, you'll see a real clear connection between the project planning checklist, or if you look on page 3 at the goals, if you look at all of those things together, the goals and the checklist, and then the analytic rubric, you'll see that the categories and the items are virtually the same. So if the goal is for the students to conduct research, then the research is on the checklist. Write a research plan. Do the research. Put the research results in the project planner. If you look over at the analytic rubric, there's a line there for research. If the student needs improvement, there is no research or not enough research. What does it mean if the student is doing a satisfactory job? The required research is complete. What does it mean to do an excellent job with your research? The project shows the required research plus additional work in this area. So the criteria for the goal, the item on the checklist, and the item on the assessment rubric are going to be the same. You should align them. They should be the same all the way across. What's different on the rubric is you identify what constitutes a good performance, maybe a poor performance, or an excellent performance. So what we'd like to see for January are some examples of goals, checklists, and assessments where the items are aligned all the way across. And these are just very, very simple statements. They tend to be commands, command-like structures.
Right, so for each goal, you identify what the student's going to do, and then you have your assessment. How are you going to measure it? How are you going to measure the level of the students succeeding to achieve that goal?
Right. So, for example, if I want one of my language goals to be speaking, if I say students will speak, well, that tells me that's important. It's an important goal, but I need more information in the goals part and in the checklist part and in the analytic part. So students will conduct research. 5 facts from their research will appear in an oral presentation.
Right.
The oral presentation will take 5 minutes.
Right.
Students will speak with clarity, with an appropriate introduction, an appropriate ending, and visuals to go along with it. Then in my assessment rubric, I have those exact same items, and I have descriptors that tell, again, what was a job that needs a lot more work, what was a satisfactory performance, what was an excellent performance, what did it look like. So you need to be able to measure those goals. Okay. Okay. We might have time for 1 or 2 questions tonight. I know we're at the very end of our time. tonight? Do Bangkok or Hua Hin have questions before we sign off tonight?
No, from Bangkok, I think one of the teachers, she's got quite a clear, goal and, the rubric, the holistic assessment and analytical assessment. I don't know whether you want to hear a short one. Yeah.
Do you have something in writing or somebody who can give us a really short, concise sort of list?
Yeah.
Because that would be helpful.
Yeah, we've got something in writing, yes.
Okay. Oh, good. We'd love to see something in writing.
Yeah.
Yes. Please.
Okay, good evening, Leslie and Cindy. Okay,
Cindy.
for my project, I have done is how to develop the environment of our school. And the goal is language skill about writing. And for the holistic rubric, I will assess my students about the strengths of the project to show the knowledge. About the knowledge, I expect that the students should have presented their problems, their ways of develop the environment, and the best way to develop the environment. This is about the holistic assessment. And for the writing, I will assess my students about the style, the form of presentation in research. And for the analytical rubrics, I will assess my student about the clearness of the report, the correction of the report, and the connection of the ideas presented. That's all. This is clear?
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have time for Ho Hin?
Let us just give just a little bit of feedback on that. Thank you for sharing that. That was really helpful, and you've obviously put a lot of work into coming up with that. What we saw on paper in terms of things like writing 50%, content X%, that, in terms of categorizing what that is that's a grading scale. And so 50% of your grade is related to writing. 25% of your grade is related to content matter. 15% is procedural or mechanics. 10% is affective. What you described for us, though, in a narrative manner, were the goals. And so we heard you say things like students will write or speak with clarity. So I think what would be this is a really strong start, and the fact that you've identified the different areas that you want for your goals and the amount of time or the balance of the grade that they're going to receive is a really good start. What would be helpful would be to get into writing what it looks like. So what does it mean to develop your writing skills? How does that look? How do you know that a student has done that?
Maybe she could write it in a sentence.
Right.
So not just the students will write.
Right.
But what is the expected outcome in their writing?
Right. Students will form a paragraph based on research that they conducted or polls that they did or surveys or questionnaires. Where does this writing come from? What is it based on? So if you could write a sentence to tell us what is it going to look like? What will students' performance look like? How will you know? How will they know that they've done it? And how will you know that they've done it?
What are they going to do with writing during the project?
Yeah. So you mean
the goal should be so that the student knows what is expected. In language class, all students write, so we just need a little more specific
information. So if I'm a student and I look at that and I see writing 50%, that tells me that I'm expected to do a lot of writing, but it doesn't tell me what that writing looks like or where I have flexibility and where I don't. So some models might be helpful.
So you have a good list of skills that you want to develop, but I would recommend putting it into a sentence so you have some kind of outcome.
And look again back at the handout from last week. look at page 3, where we gave you some examples of what a sentence-based, a very simple sentence-based set of goals looks like. So use that as a model. We're not saying copy it, but use it as a model to come up with a clear list of goals. Okay, thank you. Is there an example from Hua Hian as well?
Yes, we do have one example.
Do you have something in writing?
Yes.
Ajahn Suchata, do you have something in writing?
Yes, we have the whole chart and checklist, and he's gonna explain briefly about the holistic and analytical.
Okay.
1 minute.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Warayut Nantasen, teacher of English and French from Bangkok Yotin Burana School and Wang Kai Kangwon Hua Hin. Today, I'm going to present the evaluation from the assessment. Let's see. There are actually two parts. There are actually the project work presentation and another one is a moment, please. Actually, there are two forms
Excuse me
of the
a minute.
evaluation.
We can't see it. Could we ask you to enlarge it? There you go. Thank you very much.
Okay. The first, yes. For the first one is the project work presentation of the student. What the student to present, that is the graph and the paragraph. So the first one, let's see. On the day of the presentation, the student have to show their readiness and punctuality on the presentation. The second topic is general attraction, the beauty of the graph they present. And while presenting, we can see the smoothness. And don't forget about how to grade. You can see number 5 means excellent, 4 good, 3 fair, and 2 poor, and 1 is failure. Again, we will judge from the time administration of the student, because we tell the student that each group or each pair has to present about 5 minutes. So we can see about their time administration too. For number 5 is format presentation. And this topic we see the holistic. Okay, let's see. We see the completeness of the contents of the presentation and the correctness of the contents and communication extent in language using, right? For number 6, for the presenter presentation, communication extent in English use, correctness of language uses, pronunciation, proper gestures in presentation. For this number 6, it is an analytical assessment. This form can be done by the students themselves and the teacher. And the second form, it is the project work preparation. We can evaluate the students' mechanics by looking at what they have done before accomplishing the project, from brainstorming, working plan, responsibility sharing, following up tasks, acting on planned schedule, problem solving, individual responsibility, and teamwork. And you can see the number 1, number 2, number 3 on the right hand column. That means the group or the pair of the students. You see?
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. These are very interesting evaluation forms, and these say the word score on them. And I notice you're using a 5-point scoring system, and this really is a scoring kind of measure. In fact, I would put this in a summative kind of category.
Right.
This is a good example of a summative evaluation. In order for it to be a formative evaluation, I think you would need 3 things to go with it. One thing is we can kind of guess what your goals are, but students are going to need to see a list of what those goals are. They're also going to need to see some models of what does a fair presentation look like, what does a good one look like, what does an excellent one look like. So they're going to need to see models, and then I think the difference between this kind of an evaluation and a formative evaluation is if you look at the handout for this week, for today's session, if you look at page 4, what you see in a formative analytic rubric is not a number. It's not a grade, it's not a score. It's a description of a behavior. So if you look at page 4 on the handout, research and content, there is no research, or there's not enough research, or the required research is complete, and the amount of research will have been determined by the goals. And so I think in addition to this summative kind of assessment, we would like to encourage you again to really clearly articulate in a list what are the goals, what is the checklist, what does it look like, what are the models, so that students know what this looks like when they do a good job. And then to try to develop some of these formative assessments that are not tied to a grade or a score. They're tied to, think of it like a continuum. Where am I on the continuum in terms of my goals and my checklist? And they look like behaviors.
Right, maybe if you change the numbers from numbers to words, like...
Even so, you'd have to know...
Right, you still have to have a descriptor so that the student knows why they got that score.
Right, why did I get a fair? Why did I get a good? Is it because I only did 2 minutes of presentation? Did I get an excellent because I did more than 5? I did 7? Or is that poor? Is that poor time management? You get an excellent if you finish within the allotted amount of time.
Right, so they have a clear understanding of what they need to do during the next project to get a better score or better evaluation.
Whether it's a number or not.
Right.
But we'd really like you to, if you can, if you have time, to visit those readings that we recommended on the web. There are a lot more examples there, and they talk in more depth about formative assessments and how to offer this kind of formative feedback as you go through the process. I think people here are going to all be pretty good at this summative kind of assessment. We're all comfortable giving grades and scores, and that's the kind of testing and assessment that we experienced in our own classrooms as we were growing up as students. But to be able to give this more supportive, informative kind of feedback in terms of behaviors and performance as the students go along, I think that's the area where we want to focus our work for the next couple of sessions. So we look forward to hearing the additions that you make to these really strong starts that both the teachers in Bangkok and Hua Hin have made. Okay.
Yeah, perhaps Leslie, I think...
All right, I think we're at the end of our time. That was really useful. Thank you very much for sharing your work. We know that takes a lot of courage, and we applaud you for your hard work that you're doing and your excellent start that you've made on this project about projects.
Yeah, it's not an easy skill to develop, so it takes time and practice to develop good, clear goals, to have checklists that are easy for the students to follow, and then to align your assessments to your goals. The goals are the key. They're the most essential component of your plan. They're the ones that drive the instruction and drive the assessment, and assessment drives the students.
Exactly. And again, if for whatever reason our models in the handouts last week and this week are not clear enough for you or don't offer you enough examples, please do visit the resources that we've linked to the University of Oregon supporting website, because those are well researched and well put together examples from more examples, so you can see what other teachers are doing as well. Yeah.
Maybe the Authentic Assessment Toolbox, one of these sites that's recommended on the at the.
Yeah, you know what? One of my favorites there is that one that you found. It's called Poetry Book.
Oh yeah, they have a few examples of lessons in there. They have the goals, they have the checklists, and then they have their assessment.
Right.
Yeah.
So take a look at those as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I think we're about ready to sign off tonight. Ajaran Suchara, Ajaran Narapan, were there any additional comments or questions or anything that's not clear?
Yeah, I think what we would need some more, clarification perhaps for next sessions is, how to write formative assessment rubrics, something like that. Yeah, because it's quite clear that, we are not getting to that yet.
Right. I think we can, again, encourage you to look at some more examples on the web. And I think what we're hearing tonight is that we need to revisit this again, perhaps in session 4. And that's good formative feedback for us.
Yes.
And we do have flexibility with these sessions. I would welcome, Cindy and I would both welcome suggestions and email feedback from our esteemed facilitators. If you have guidance for us for the next 2 sessions, we'd certainly appreciate hearing those suggestions so we can make the video conferencing more effective as
Absolutely.
well. So please send those our way, anonymously or otherwise. Okay, so we'd like to say thank you tonight. Thank you to the Royal Thai Distance Learning Foundation. Many thanks to Tan Kwan Kao out in the provinces and to the teachers. Many of you we know have come from far away and are out in centers and have traveled so that you can take part in these sessions. We really respect you for that and admire the work that you're doing. Thank you to our facilitators from Thai TESOL and from Chulalongkorn University. We could not do this without you. You're doing an amazing job with the groups in the Hua Hin and Bangkok sites, and we thank you for that. Thank you also to TOT Communications. We appreciate the ongoing technical support and troubleshooting, and just really thank you to the whole team. And to the U.S. Embassy, we saw Kun George tonight, and we saw Kun Nina again out in the audience circulating around. We appreciate all your hard work as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leslie and Cindy. All the best for Christmas and Happy New Year, and see you next year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leslie, Cindy. See you next year.
ค่ะอาจารย์คะก็จากที่งานที่อาจารย์พรีเซนต์ให้ดูเนี่ยนะคะในของทางกรุงเทพก็อาจารย์เลสลี่ก็คอมเมนต์ว่าตัวรูบริกอะค่ะไม่คือน่าจะเป็นลักษณะเป็น description นะคะบอกว่าเราต้องการอะไรคือที่เราจะไปเขียนว่า writing 50% นั้นเราต้องการให้เด็กเขียนได้เป็นอย่างไรและในส่วนของทางหัวหินนะคะทางอาจารย์ที่จากวินโยธินก็อาจารย์บอกว่าอันนั้นลักษณะเป็น summative assessment มากกว่านะคะเพราะกำหนดคะแนนของถ้าเป็น formative นี่ก็ควรจะเป็น descriptive มากขึ้นนะคะซึ่งตัวอย่างก็อยู่ในชีทหน้า4นะคะหรือว่าอาจารย์จะดูตัวอย่างในเว็บไซต์ที่อาจารย์และซีได้ลิงก์อัพไว้นะคะในไทย UO เนี่ยอาจารย์ลองดูมีตัวอย่างทั้งที่เป็น goal เป็น checklist แล้วก็เป็น assessment อาจารย์ลองดูตัวอย่างนะคะเพื่อที่เราจะได้ทำการบ้านให้อาจารย์ในคราวหน้านะคะอาจารย์ไปขยายมา goal checklist แล้วก็assessment นะคะทั้งที่เป็น holistic แล้วก็เป็น analytical โดยที่เขียนเป็นลักษณะเป็น description นะคะค่ะอาจารย์ลองทำดูนะคะสำหรับวันนี้ก็คงจบเท่านี้นะคะขอบพระคุณทุกท่านที่ให้ความสนใจพบกันปีหน้าเช่นกันค่ะ